Hi friends, Mindy here. I am back with my prompt list for Dephemerember. I am on day 2 of this challenge. This is hosted by Barbara at 49 Dragonflies and Luise Heinzel. And you can check out both of their channels for all of the daily prompts and what they've done up until now. I'm obviously behind. I'm just going to work through this at my own pace. The prompt for today is stars and a paint sample. Now, most of us might have like paint samples you get from the hardware store laying around your house, and somewhere in my house I have some, but I just couldn't get my hands on them. So I decided to use this cardstock that I have. This is from a paper pad. It's one of those like hot buy paper pads from Michael's. I've had it forever, but it's literally called Paint Chips, I think is the name of that paper pad. So I thought I would just take this paper and cut it down and use it. Now, this is 12 by 12 paper, so my paint chips or my paint samples are going to be quite large, but I will be able to cut them down when I actually go to use these pieces of ephemera. So I'm just going to trim down a couple columns of each of these different colors. I ended up not using all of them, but I wanted to have a wide variety of colors because I have a project in mind for these for after the first of the year, and so I just wanted to have a bunch of different colors, and I'm going to kind of do a few different things to these paint samples. One of the fun things about this particular challenge of creating your own ephemera, especially for junk journaling, is you can kind of use up your scraps. A while back I created a junk journal literally out of like junk mail and that kind of stuff. And so this is kind of a continuation on that idea. So these are just things that you might have just around your house that you could turn into something. Here I am using some light modeling paste and a couple of different star stencils. I can't remember where this one came from, but the other one that I'll be using is a Tim Holtz stencil. And so I'm just going to lightly apply this with a palette knife, trying to kind of vary how I have this stencil put down. So that's what I'm doing here on screen. But going back to this idea of, one of the fun things about this whole concept is these prompts are not necessarily things that I would put together myself. I would never maybe think of putting, stars and paint samples together. So it's challenging and it's fun, but also a good way to kind of use up your stash in a different way that's just kind of interesting and kind of challenging. Some of the prompts are a little bit more straightforward than others, and it's interesting to see how everybody is kind of interpreting these. So make sure you go and watch, if you haven't already, Barbara and Luise, because they're amazing, and they even show you kind of how you can make your own paint samples and just different things. So they have some really interesting twists on these prompts. So again, I'm just going through here with this modeling paste, and now I'm just using this Tim Holtz stencil, and I'm applying this pretty thin modeling paste, or this is, I think this is the Light and Fluffy from the Crafters Workshop, and it's going to dry white on here, not like completely opaque, but white enough. And so I'll be able to do a few different things with this. And like I said, I have an idea in mind for a project for how to use these. But for now, I'm just going to go through here and apply the modeling paste to a few different paint samples. I'm not going to put the modeling paste on every paint sample. I'm going to do a few different things, and I'm just kind of, you can see because these are so long, I'm having to kind of work with them. I don't know the size of a like traditional paint sample, but it's certainly not 12 inches tall. So when I go to use these, I'll be cutting them down or just kind of cutting out a piece of them, which is why I'm kind of making sure I go over each of the lines and stuff, so that if I do trim it down, it's just nice to have things kind of hanging off of the edge. It just gives a different look to that. So now I'm doing this other stencil here on this yellow, and again I'm just kind of trying to turn the stencil, and this one is a little bit more difficult because it's so small, the stencil, so I keep going off of the edge. But with modeling paste, you can always just kind of scrape it scrape it off as long as it hasn't started to dry. So I will say that with modeling paste, do be sure that when you're finished, you immediately clean your stencils. Otherwise, the modeling paste will dry in the holes, and it will basically make it so that you can't use your stencils anymore. So I'm going to take that and set it off to the side. You can see I did a few different colors, and now I'm going to pull out a few more that I am going to now use some ink, and I'm actually going to be using an archival ink in black soot, and I'm going to use those same 2 stencils, and I'm going to use one of those. This is a little tiny makeup blending brush. I wanted to use one that was pretty small because some of the stars on this stencil were quite small. I wanted to make sure that I got a really good impression from this stencil. So this actually takes me a few minutes here with this ink. But I chose this archival in the black soot because it's a really dark black. So I'm just going to go through here, and you'll kind of see, I'll pull up the stencil here, and you can kind of see what that's going to look like. This one has a lot of contrast to it just because it's such a light color, and the black is really a deep color of black. And I kind of went, got some outside of the stencil, so I'm just kind of covering that up by making sure I place my stencil in a certain way. And I got a little frustrated with that little tiny one, so I went to one of my bigger blending brushes, and you can see how that looks at the end. And now I'm going to take the Tim Holtz stencil. This is the same one that I used with the modeling paste again, and just applying it again with this archival ink. You could also do this with like black acrylic paint. Just make sure that you don't have too much paint on your sponge or your whatever that you're using, because it can seep underneath the stencil. So I decided I was just going to do ink. And then now what I'm doing is I have these star stamps. These are from a really old Heidi Swap set. I don't even remember the name of the stamp set, but they're just a bunch of different shapes and sizes of stars, and I have placed them randomly on the stamping block. And then I'm just going across both of these paint chips here, and I'm kind of turning my stamp as I go just to get a varying kind of smattering of stars. And then I'll come back through and kind of, if I feel like there's an area that might need a little star, if it's too sparse or whatever, and just kind of fill that area in. I actually really liked how these turned out because there's less of the stars on them than like that one orange one. You can see there's really kind of intense, but I when I go to use that, I'll be able to cover some of that up, so I think it'll be okay. But I really liked how these stamped versions came out on here. And then the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to take this is just one of the Tim Holtz blenders, and I'm going to go back in with that same archival ink, and I'm going to go all the way around the edge of all of these paint samples. I'm not like finishing these to like 100% complete, because I will do something with them when I'm actually using them. But I'm just kind of wanted to add a little bit here so you can see me. I have a white gel pen. This is really hard to see on camera, but I'm just kind of making little highlights in some of the stars, just kind of randomly all the way through. You can kind of tell a little bit. It's kind of hard to see on camera, but just wanted to add some interest. And then on these other ones here with the modeling paste, I have a really light Tombow marker, and I'm just putting some shadow on like just one side of a few of these stars, just kind of like the bigger ones, not necessarily every single star, but it just gives it, you can kind of tell there just a little bit more dimension. It'll be easier to tell on this yellow one here. And this was with that other stencil, but the idea is still the same, just kind of random marks, and it just gives it a little bit more interest and a little bit more more dimension. So these are how they ended up looking. These are the modeling paste, and then the inked up ones as well. So if you liked this video, I would appreciate it if you gave it a thumbs up, and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. I have some close-up pictures for you, and be sure to check out 49 Dragonflies and Luise. And until next time, bye-bye.